Apparently, we can't afford to live anymore, and the rich are gaslighting us. And I say apparently because it's very apparent. This is a Medium article by Jessica Wildfire. A few years ago, one of my friends confessed something over coffee. She leaned forward, her voice fell to a hush. I love my kids, but from a financial standpoint, I regret having them. That's a pretty crushing statement. My friend is a tenured professor. She's published books with major presses, including Oxford. People beg her to speak at conferences. Despite all this, her family is barely getting by. Her husband is also a highly regarded professor in engineering. When she was done talking, her face glowed with shame. It's a common story these days. We can't afford to live anymore. Here's something that might surprise you. The average cost of living in the US far exceeds the average income of most professionals. We're talking about nurses and social workers, firefighters and police officers, school teachers and pediatricians, even carpenters and engineers. They're the ones who keep society running, and they currently don't make enough to support their families. Take a look at the average monthly living costs for a family of 4. These are extremely conservative estimates gathered from multiple cost of living calculators, plus my own observations. Housing, $1,500. Transportation, including gas, $800. Food, $1,000. Utilities, $400. Phones, $150. Entertainment, $50. Clothing, $200. Healthcare, $400. Emergency savings, $500. Total, $5,000. The median household income stands at $5,264 per month before taxes. That leaves just under $4,000 after taxes, and it doesn't include deductions for 401k and basic health insurance or student loans. Student loans would crush just about any of these professionals. Student loans suck the life out of everything valuable. All things considered, the average household is sinking into debt by about $1,000 per month. The average household requires 2 incomes now. Households with 2 incomes used to have extra cash to spend on things like vacations or private school tuition. That's not true anymore. 2 years ago, the New York Times reported on the average incomes and expenses of parents with 2 children. Time and again, they found that even 2 incomes barely brings in enough cash, since you wind up paying anywhere from $500 to $2,000 a month for childcare. The reason is simple. The average job hasn't kept up with the cost of living. It doesn't even come close. Rising costs outpace income growth. And the biggest one on there is education costs, followed by housing costs, healthcare costs, and then the median income is the bottom line in the graph. Basically, half of one parent's monthly income covers daycare, and the rest goes to offset the cost of living. It's pretty brutal. These days, the luckiest families break even. Everyone else is still going into debt, just not as much as they would be with a single income. Starting a family has become a luxury. CNN has a new online calculator called How Much Will It Cost to Raise Your Child? It's fun to play with in a perverse kind of way. Here's how much it's going to cost me to raise my daughter. Childcare and education, $50,940. Housing, $76,810. Food, $53,912. Transportation, $46,368. Clothing, $19,660. Healthcare, $26,251. Miscellaneous, $20,785, for a whopping grand total of $294,704. Source, CNN. According to calculators like this, having just 1 kid adds about $17,000 a year to your annual cost of living. After all, you have to feed and clothe them, you have to move into a bigger house or apartment. This might explain why the US birth rate is the lowest it's been in 32 years. More than 40% of millennials report putting off children and buying homes because of financial instability. This is going to have consequences for baby boomers. They should care, if only for selfish reasons. According to Joseph Coughlin of Forbes, it means they're not going to be able to sell their homes. That's important because older people typically want to downsize after they retire and cash in on their equity. Here's how Coughlin imagines that conversation going. Boomer seller. The town has great schools. Millennial buyer. I don't have kids. Boomer seller. The house has 3 bedrooms. My husband and I have enjoyed it for years. Millennial buyer. I live alone with my dog. Boomer seller. Well, there's a big, wonderful yard for your dog to play in. millennial buyer. It's a very small dog. In other words, not great. Sorry, boomers. The wealthy engage in financial gaslighting. Gaslighting is when you construct a fake reality to excuse yourself from your own sinister actions and behaviors. That's a concise definition. Abusers do it all the time. Hoarding wealth is a kind of abuse the wealthy inflict on the entire world. To excuse it, they construct a series of lies that allow them to blame everyone for their own financial problems. It's pretty easy to distract someone from systemic inequality and make them feel guilty about a financial situation that's not their fault. You just have to talk about flat-screen televisions and smartphones, even if those make up a tiny fraction of someone's monthly budget. You call them lazy and tell them they spend too much time watching Netflix. You browbeat them for not investing in stocks or pouring money into volatile assets. You shame them for working meaningful jobs that contribute something to civilization instead of becoming rich so they can opt out of the economy altogether. You accuse them of resenting wealth and tell them they have a poor attitude toward money, whatever that means. Then you pump them full of fairy tales about how someone made a fortune from nothing. Finally, you tell them money doesn't matter and that no amount of it will ever make them happy unless they learn to love themselves. It works wonders because it confuses the hell out of people. Sufficiently gaslight someone over their finances and they won't know what to think anymore. That's the point. Financial gaslighting is doing serious damage. There's millions of desperate people out there. If they have a job, it doesn't pay enough. Here's the advice they're getting. Invest in stocks, start a side hustle, go viral, start your own company, spend less money. No offense, but this all sounds kind of like throwing a drowning person a paddle made out of lead. It might look helpful, but it's not. It does nothing but shift responsibilities from governments and economic structures to overwhelmed, overburdened individuals. Say it with me. Ding, ding, ding. It's great to make extra income off a side hustle or turn your talents into a job that doesn't exist yet. It's great to be exceptional, but being exceptional by definition means that not everyone can do it. You don't solve poverty and wage gaps by expecting everyone to be a genius. Let's get real for a minute. The economy needs baristas. It needs cashiers and servers and farmers. Society needs police officers. No, it doesn't. And school teachers. Yes, it does. It needs nurses and social workers. When someone gaslights them about their finances because they can't pay their bills, they're pretending we can live in a world without them. The truth is, we need them far more than we do lifestyle vloggers. The solution to widespread financial desperation isn't to turn everyone into millionaire YouTubers and Instagram models. It's to pay them more. That was a good conclusion. Here's another Medium article by Concoda, whoever that is, called "The Elites Have Set the Stage for the Greatest Economic Crisis in History. The entire economy has been subprimed and there's no way out." Time after time over history, speculative manias seemingly emerge out of nowhere, fueling extraordinary booms that prelude devastating busts. After a while, you'd think we would have recognized how to avoid them, but as manias tend to occur every 20 years or so, the next generation is doomed to repeat the mistakes of their predecessors. And it's been the same for over 300 years. From the tulip mania to the dot-com bubble, once leaders instill moral hazard in the minds of their citizens, cheap money ignites excessive greed and risk-taking, creating a speculative frenzy. Although each bubble possesses unique characteristics, they follow a similar pattern no matter where in the world they occur, with some exhibiting more bizarre tendencies than others. In the 1980s, after a small crash in Kuwait's official stock market, the government introduced tighter regulations, forcing investors to stick their money into riskier investments. Housed in an air-conditioned parking garage, Kuwaiti's unofficial stock market, Souk al-Manak, became the third largest worldwide by market cap after wealthy investors bid up the price of speculative companies. In the end, it took a simple rumor of a dealer's check bouncing for the bubble to burst, causing a deep recession in the Kuwaiti economy. Decade after decade, similar booms and busts surfaced across the world with the same flawed thinking from elites producing the same result. But when the 2008 financial crisis came along, the rules of the game changed. The interconnectedness of global finance meant that one asset class was capable of bringing down the entire system. The US government and the Federal Reserve had no choice but to use the same policies that had caused the crisis to prevent a collapse. Their solution? turned the entire US economy into one gigantic moral hazard. 13 years on, and bubbles are no longer bubbles. Instead, they have become the hip new asset class on the street. Every speculative asset has been securitized. Stocks, corporate debt, real estate, fine wine, fine art, vintage guitars, take your pick. You're spoilt for choice. Valuations don't matter. It's whether the price goes up or down. The elites have replaced America's economy with the everything bubble, and it's harder than ever to achieve the American dream. Every year, home and food prices rise. More manufacturing industries disappear overseas, and the cost of healthcare and education skyrockets. But rather than addressing these issues, the American elites have ignored them and now define their success by whether stonks go up. Stonks go up is not a reference to stocks per se, but the system that allows asset prices to rise indefinitely. In reality, stocks are not stocks anymore. We have no market or price discovery, just a constant struggle to postpone economic gravity. To make our situation a little less surreal and more of a parody, we replaced the C with an N and invented the stonks meme. We clung to the weirdly shaped man in a suit and tie standing in front of a chart to find solace in our crazy economic world. Our future rests on whether a four-figure number on a screen rises. The S&P 500 index's closing price must be stapled to everybody's fridge in the morning because it's the #1 marker of America's health. While that number remains stable, America's flawed bubble economy remains stable. To the elites, nothing else matters. Although it does zero for the country long term, the upper echelons of society, the politicians, the Wall Street machine, the bankers, the central bankers, the look at my yacht high worth net individuals have become obsessed with preserving the indefinite rise of asset prices, and for now, they can do just that. Since the speculative activities Wall Street engaged in pre the 2008 financial crisis broke the system in two, they had to copy the politicians and the central bankers and embrace financial insanity. It's common knowledge that banks create money out of thin air to maintain the fake economy, but what most people don't realize is, post the 2008 crisis, they create assets out of thin air to make up for the poor liquidity in the system. Before, subprime was the prominent liquidity driver, but as that market collapsed, Wall Street needed a quick replacement. First, they used pristine collateral such as US government bonds, but as risk appetite increased, they began to securitize everything from auto loans to credit cards. How many of us, dear viewers and listeners, knew much about this before I read it to us? Is this interesting? If it's too wonky for you, I get it, but if we don't understand this, we don't know how to escape. I am going to skip ahead a little bit, but please go back and read this if you feel wonky. You have become part of the craziest monetary experiment in human history, and you're powerless to stop it. It has become part of you without you even realizing it. Every medium you use to express your anger against the system only feeds and increases its ever-growing power. Decentralization, the most popular escape from the system, is the last mainstream beacon of hope, but it's a false hope. It's a retreat from society altogether. We're removing ourselves from the system rather than changing it, which will lead to the stark fragmentation of society, the centralists versus the decentralists. This won't end well. While the decentralization movement builds momentum behind the scenes, we will continue to see craziness become the new normal. We're at the stage in the cycle where Gene Simmons is buying Dogecoin, or however you say it, and tweeting about it, where the highest profile CEO in the world tweets about the size of his junk and faces no consequences, where every mainstream media outlet has outlawed any economic voice of reason who promotes sound money and economics. Whatever happens next in both scenarios, a conflict between the centralists and the decentralists or the collapse of the stonks going up machine, our fate has been decided. We must face the future head-on and brace for the inevitable downturn. Before, financial systems were somewhat disconnected. Risks were bifurcated. If something broke, it didn't cause other parts of the system to collapse. But in the 21st century, everything is connected, and there's no turning back. You're probably thinking, what can you do to stop it? Not much, but it's not all doom and gloom. Instead, this is a time to get ready for what's to come. And this is where I step in, dear viewers and listeners. What I think is ready to come is revolution, and I think we should get ready for that. This is a time to learn how to weather the storm. This is a time to cut out the noise. This is a time to think different, to think outside the box, and to see things for what they really are. What you do to prepare for the coming crisis is up to you. It's your choice what steps you take. Some people are buying cryptocurrencies, some people are stocking up on gold and silver coins, some people are even prepping, building shelters and bunkers, but you don't have to go that far. Just make sure you do something, anything, the bare minimum. That's what matters. Appreciate that in the next few decades, life will get harder, and planning now will save you a lot of hardship in the future. And if by some miracle what we are experiencing is a new paradigm and the next collapse never occurs, you'll praise yourself knowing you did everything necessary for the stonk apocalypse becoming a reality. I really do believe, dear viewers and listeners, that we're in for rocky times ahead. I think the best thing we can all do is to make sure we have plenty of savings in the bank, but as we read in the previous article, that's not easy to do. Eventually, we're going to need to overhaul the system so that wages can go up for regular workers. The people in charge don't want that, so we're going to have to force the issue.